Hello and welcome to Green Angle, the show that explores the environment we live in, ecological problems we face while proffering sustainable solutions. I am Ugochi Oluibo, and on this episode of the program, we'll zoom in on genetically modified organisms and their effects on our health and the environment. GMOs, genetically modified organisms, are living organisms whose genetic materials have been artificially manipulated in a laboratory through genetic engineering. This science creates unstable combinations of plants, animal, bacteria, and viral genes that do not occur in nature or through traditional crossbreeding methods. The National Library of Science in the United States pointed out the potential benefits of modified crops as being tastier, more nutritious, and being resistant to diseases and droughts. It also listed some potential risks, including the fact that genetic alterations can cause harm and can lead to the possible extinction of the original organism. Tomatoes have been developed that resist frost and freezing temperatures with anti-freeze genes from cold water fish. The Food and Drug Administration in the US also recently approved the genetical engineering of apples that do not brown and potatoes that do not bruise. Most developed nations do not consider GMOs to be safe, and in more than 60 countries around the world, including Japan, Australia, and all the countries in the European Union, there are significant restrictions or outright ban on the production and sale of GMOs. Some point to the benefits of GM crops as improved yields for farmers, reduced draws on natural resources and fossil fuels, and provides nutritional benefits. Others, such as the Center for Food Safety, call the genetic engineering of plants and animals potentially one of the greatest and most intractable environmental challenges of the 21st century. Corn, cotton, soy, canola, sugar beets, Hawaiian papaya, yellow squash, and products derived from the above, including soy protein, cornstarch, and high fructose corn syrup, are all foods that are genetically modified. Herbicide tolerance crops, which let the farmers spray weed killers directly on the crop without killing it, and pesticide producing crops where the plant produces its own internal pesticide, are genetically engineered traits that have been added to our food crops. These crops are engineered to withstand massive spraying with the toxic pesticide that does not break down easily in the environment and ends up in our streams. Also, the pesticides found in GE crops may be largely responsible for the dying off of many insects, including honeybees and monarch butterflies. You're watching Green Angle, and we're still discussing GMOs in Africa. So I came over to meet Dr. Patrick Ijewere to tell us how GMOs affect our health. He's a doctor and a wellness expert. Lots of people have praised GMOs, and many more are condemning GMOs. What is the problem with GMOs?
Let's start from a simple perspective, then we'll get into more scientific. There's a saying by a recent, I think a senator, there is sense, there's common sense, and there is nonsense. GMOs, what are GMOs? You take material, genetic material that belongs to one species, and you force it into another species that under natural law, under God's law, do not mate or cross-pollinate. Example, you take the gene of a human and you force it into that of a horse, or the gene of a pig, you force it into a human. In natural law, in God's law, those two species do not mate. In other words, they do not exchange genetic material. And we know quite often if you do so, there are metagenic consequences of those. Big fancy medical terms. All right. You now take genetics or genes from a bacteria and force it into a tomatoes. Some may argue, well, you're taking just the trait that you want to put it into the other species. If there's a particular trait, i.e. you want the vitamin A trait. My goodness, we have carrot, we have moringa, we have so many things that are loaded with vitamin A. Consume it. Why must you now force it into cassava? So from a common sense perspective, nature has already ordered things in a way that things work to the health advantage of not only the human, but also the environment around us. So from that common sense perspective, GMO is very concerning. Another common sense. You tell me that your seeds are superior to mine. You've altered them in the lab. And each time I want to plant them, I must come and buy them from you. Hello? The way God's law works and nature works, everything is circular, it's cyclic. You plant a seed, it gives you a plant, gives you a tree or a fruit. The fruit bears seed. You take the seed, you maybe select the best of the seeds. Next season, you plant again, and you get another tree or a plant or a fruit. And it's cyclical. That's the law of nature. But they say, no, stop planting your seed. Come and get the seed we have altered in the laboratory. It's superior to your seed. Common sense. Now, utter nonsense. When I want to have a child, I'm to do what? Come to your lab or go to the company in the US and buy sperm from them to have a child? And when my child wants to have a child, he must go back to the company and buy sperm to have another child? Utter nonsense.
Let's look at the health impacts of GMOs. You are a medical doctor, but now you're advocating for more healthier options. How do GMOs affect our health? Can you break down the science for us?
All right, it's a bit about my background. Born and raised here in Lagos, went to St. Gabriel's College of Balende Secondary School prior to going to the US. Trained at George Washington, Howard University, and did my specialty course at Johns Hopkins University, top medical school in the US, top research center in the US. And so we're used to the dialogues of what science is bringing in and what science may not or ought not to bring in. We were trained in that whole debating mentality. All my training was done in the US before coming back home a few years ago. Now, when you look at medical science of GMO, again, I refer to my colleagues in the US, whom I get a lot of data from and see what is published. And they're seeing a rise that literally correlates to the rise in GMO consumption. From the mid-1990s, when GMOs first hit the shores or the stores, the grocery stores in the US, doctors are showing data that indicates an increase in cancers, in GI problems, what's called leaky gut syndrome, what's called inflammatory bowel diseases. In children, we're seeing increase in allergies, asthmas, and related autoimmune disorders. So that's data from that side. Here in Nigeria, we're not really collecting data yet because we don't understand this GMO phenomenon. But we are seeing in the clinical office, in our offices here, in my practice, in this month alone, we have 2 cases of MS, multiple sclerosis, diseases literally unheard of in Nigeria. The medical community is very concerned, for those who are aware or alert to what is going on. Having said that, a lot of medical doctors, even in the US and here in Nigeria, don't understand this whole GMO conundrum.
I mean, are you saying most of the cereals our children eat, imported cereals, might be GMOs?
In genetic material from one species to another, it isn't that you just take one small gene and put it in the other place. There's a lot of inaccuracy in the science. And when you do that transfer, there's collateral damage. In other words, you may create other gene transfers and other mutations in that species you're putting the gene into. What is the basis of cancer? Mutation. So you're telling me now, these mutant tomatoes, because when you take genetics from one plant or one source into another, that tomatoes is no more tomatoes. It's a GMO tomatoes, it's a mutant tomatoes. You tell me that that is now safe for me to consume when it already has mutations in it. Let's take it down further. Regarding BT corn, BT stands for bacteria, a particular kind of bacteria. This bacteria in its nature makes a substance that repels pests. Science discovered this. Okay, if we can find that gene and put that gene into corn, When the bugs or the pests come and eat the corn, that gene will intercalate into the genetics of that pest, produce that pesticide, and kill the pest from inside out. Brilliant science. The West are awesome at science. And so are scientists also. Hello.
So
what happens to us when we eat the same corn? The same thing. In your gut, we have billions to trillions of bacteria, even more bacteria than we have cells in our body. And those bacteria are so important to your immune system, to breaking down the food that you consume, to making your food bioavailable so that your body can absorb the food. Those bacteria are so important to the health of the entire body. So you now introduce this BT corn, and these genetics from the corn, of course, gets into the bacteria in our gut. In our gut, our healthy bacteria now begin to produce this little substance that acts as a pesticide. Nobody in their right mind will go and pour glyphosate or Roundup or some other pesticide or herbicide into a cup and drink it. But you're not telling me I should consume it in my corn, that it's good for me, that is higher yield in the farms, which is baloney, which we will discuss.
It's all about the money.
Period. So in the gut, your body now becomes a mini pesticide factory. You're making these pesticides, which are going to do what? Destroy the gut lining to start with, destroy the healthy bacteria. Things that you don't otherwise absorb from your gut into your bloodstream goes into your bloodstream. Foods that are not totally digested also cross. The idea now, what happens now is your immune system wakes up. There's strangers around here. Your normal healthy immune system that polices for abnormal cells going astray, area boys to use that term, and gets rid of them. Notices that there's a lot of strange things now in the bloodstream, strange genetics, strange undigested food particles, and you name it. Things that otherwise would not cross the gut into the blood. If those items get into your cells, as far as your immune system is concerned, that cell is an abnormal cell and I must take care of it or destroy it. So that, of course, creates inflammation in the body. That, of course, causes your immune system to go into a mode where it might even destroy its own natural friends. In other words, an autoimmune disorder kicks in.
How about the environmental problems that GMOs cause when they get into the soil, when they are washed away, when it rains, and how does it affect the entire ecosystem?
I use the word calamity, and in a moment you'll understand why. So I have this seed, I plant it, it grows into a corn or whatever plant. They like to use terms like confined field trial. Who controls the wind? The wind takes the pollen of that abnormal GMO crop and disperses it all over. You've done what? You have contaminated the surrounding farms. Are you going to pay for that contamination? Your farmer neighbor didn't want GMO, he didn't plant GMO. Now, by virtue of natural dispersion, you've put pollution into the air and into his crops. That's number one. Number two, you say this seed will give you more yield. But to do so, I have to spray certain chemicals into the farm that you make also. These chemicals cause a lot of havoc in the soil. Yes, they may kill what we call the weeds. What we call weeds is basically our ignorance. We don't know the benefit of that plant, hence we call it a weed. And that chemical, that herbicide, the pesticide goes into the soil. The popular one is glyphosate. Glyphosate, even in the US, is classified as an antibiotic. We have tons of bacteria, billions in the soil, that help to break down soil nutrients, to make them bioavailable for the root of the plants to absorb them. So even the health of the plant is tied to the microorganisms in the soil. Hello, common sense. So I apply a pesticide or herbicide or whatever to kill the other plants so they don't compete with your BT corn or your GMO tomatoes or your whatever other GMO crop you're planting. We're damaging the soil. The soil is what the plants require. That crop cannot have as much nutrients because the mediators who make the nutrients available, those bacteria and those fungus in the soil, are gone. Over time, that soil becomes less yielding, period. And this is science. Go to the Rodale Institute, read the information from them, read other organic farming institutes, and they'll tell you this science. The health of this plant is tied to the health of the soil.
When it rains, it washes
That's the next aspect. Those chemicals are washed into other nearby lands and waterways. Pollution. Those chemicals affect the aquaculture, both the fish and the plant culture that are in the streams, the rivers, and their consequences already documented in science and by environmentalists. There's the American Association of Environmental Medicine. Go to their website. You get this information. We are new to GMO. They've been a GMO for a long time, so they have the science to our advantage.
So we're saying no to GMOs.
Roundly NO to GMOs. In Nigeria, we have such a grand biodiversity. Here's the other impact. Today, most of the so-called medicines that are effective come from herbs or extracts that are now synthesized in the labs. If we're putting things in an environment that are going to destroy our biodiversity, whose future pharmaceutical industry are we destroying? Ours. Does it make sense? People would, why have 19 EU countries banned GMOs? Cultivation. Go ask Burkina Faso their experience recently. Go ask Indian farmers their experience. If I have to buy seed from you every time I want to plant, I want to eat corn, I want to eat pawpaw, I want to eat pineapple, I want to eat yam, I'm enslaved to you. Period. In your countries, you have signed patents that gives you patent right over this GMO seed. You come here and you give to all my colleagues farmers for free. But you don't give them the full story. They plant it. Next season, they cannot plant the seeds that come from those GMO. They have to come back to you and buy it because you have the patent. And if we decide not to follow those patent rules, the WTO, the World Trade Organization, gets on our back. Those companies will tell you, in 2030, in 2050, your population will double, triple, quadruple. How will you feed them? And put fear into our minds and into our hearts. Go to Benue, go to Kafanchan, see the waste that is occurring from our fruits and our vegetables, our native rice, mangoes, and pineapples. Go to my village. Our issue is not production. Our issue is getting those products either to the consumers where they are in the cities or packaging the products for export. Here's another area I must mention. If you're giving me GMOs to plant and I have to spray all those chemicals on to help to cultivate them, end of the day, who am I selling those GMOs to? Europe says they don't want GMOs. Other countries, globally, there's about 64 countries that have turned away GMOs. Who's my market? I have your chemicals on the GMO crops I'm selling to you. Europe says they don't want it. Who am I selling it to? Economically, it does not make sense. It does not.
So you're saying it's bad news for us to think GMOs?
Wellness is our gift from God. Therefore, we must do everything possible to protect that gift. We are created in His image and likeness. We're created in perfection. He put us in the Garden of Eden. We haven't even explored 1/100th of our Garden of Eden. I have colleagues who are in the herbal area who have documented scientifically that we have over 100 plants in Nigeria that are preventive or therapeutic against malaria, and much more. We haven't touched 1/100th of our Garden of Eden. And we want to introduce chemicals and strange seeds to bastardize and corrupt our garden. So if our systems don't wake up, when I came back to Nigeria a few years ago, I met with NAFDAC. I asked the then DG of the Food Directorate how much they knew about GMOs. And she was quite honest, and I praised her for her honesty. They knew little or nothing about GMOs. I offered myself, I said, I would come and train you all on GMOs. I put in a proposal. I got a reply, there was no money. I said, no problem, I will come and do it for free. Since then, I've not heard back from NAFDAC. So when now biosafety comes and says that this is good for Nigeria, let me see their data. Let's have a robust discussion. We have universities, we have schools of technology. Put the word out there, let them all discuss it. Let's get all the data from the US and Europe and whoever else. But the bottom line is the health of our ecosystem and health of our people. And what data is showing is it's not healthy, period. Wellness is our gift from God, and we must do everything possible to protect that gift, wellness.
I mean, we really need to get the word out and have people be aware to make healthier choices. Thanks for your time, Dr. Ijewere.
Thank you very much, Ugochi.
I've been talking to Dr. Patrick Ijewere, and he's a doctor, medical doctor, and a wellness expert. He's been telling us about how GMOs are bad for our health, our agriculture, our environment and the ecosystem, and of course, how bad it is for the economy. It's now time for us to help you understand the technical terms we've used so far and what to look out for when buying organic or non-organic food like these corns I'm holding here. They might look the same, even taste the same, but they're not really the same. A genetically modified organism, or GMO, is an organism that has had its DNA altered or modified in some way through genetic engineering. According to the U.S. Department of Agriculture, the biggest use of GMO technology has been in large-scale agricultural crops. GM technology has been around for the past 20 years, and today 70 to 80% of the foods we eat at home or away from home contain ingredients that have been genetically modified. Most developed nations do not consider GMOs to be safe. In 61 countries around the world, including Australia, Japan, and all the countries in the European Union, there are significant restrictions or outright bans on the production and sale of GMOs. How well do you know what you are eating? Science and technology has drastically altered our process of planting, growing, and harvesting our food supply. We hear then when they say that agriculture must keep up with the growing population of the world to stave off hunger. But when one considers the horrific consequences of GMOs on our health and environment, that particular reason kind of becomes very invalid. That's it on Green Angle for today. Thanks for your time. For your comments and suggestions, please use the address on your screen. I am Ugochi Oluibo, and be an aware consumer.